Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins-Treworgy, also known as Byron Assidious. This is a storyteller's perspective. I'd like to spend this piece responding to a rather lengthy bullet point list that was put out on X by Palantir, which is a company that has deservedly so come under a great deal of scrutiny the last couple of years. The folks over at the network, particularly Digny and his mentor, Roger Athay, are quite unhappy with Palantir, and most people who are of a similar mindset are also not trusting of this company. I myself do not entirely trust them. But this bullet point list that they put forth comes from a book entitled The Technological Republic. It's an excerpt they put together. And they posted it on X, and I've got some responses. You'll see some still photos, some screen captures of the list that comes from the post they put up. And I'll be giving off my responses. Point 1. Silicon Valley owes a moral debt to the country that made its rise possible. The engineering elite of Silicon Valley has an affirmative obligation to participate in the defense of the nation. My response: no, absolutely, resolutely, no. For starters, I find it rather chillingly amusing that Palantir, which has faced accusations of privacy concerns and pretty much not giving a shit about people's privacy or data sovereignty, for them to try and say anything about morality, they can get fucked. Saying that the Silicon Valley engineering elite has an affirmative obligation to partake in the nation's defense sounds a lot to me like compulsory service, which has never been the American methodology or model. Their second bullet point: we must rebel against the tyranny of the apps. While I agree that apps on phones and devices have shrunk our imaginations somewhat and kind of cribbed down on our approach to innovation, I do not believe that they are solely responsible for that loss or lack of drive. Their bullet point 3, free email is not enough. The decadence of a culture or civilization, and indeed its ruling class, will be forgiven only if that culture is capable of delivering economic growth and security for the public. My response: the decadence that Palantir speaks of is easy enough to spot in our society, especially in the West, but it's folks like the board of directors and shareholders of Palantir who are often caught dangling that decadence in everyone's face. It seems a bit disingenuous, if you ask me. Point 4. The limits of soft power, of soaring rhetoric alone, have been exposed. The ability of free and democratic societies to prevail requires something more than moral appeal. Well, then why are you appealing to morality in the first bullet point? Anyway, it requires hard power, and hard power in this century will be built on software. My response: I largely agree that soft power's limits have been partly exposed, and that to be effective, soft power must be coupled with demonstrable hard power. But I disagree fundamentally that hard power will be built entirely on software, as software requires people to program and deploy it. And people utilize primarily, when you cut through all the smiles and pretty lies and bullshit, they rely on hard power and tangible resources and materials. Point 5. The question is not whether AI weapons will be built, it is who will build them and for what purpose. Our adversaries will not pause to indulge in theatrical debates about the merits of developing technologies with critical military and national security applications. They will proceed. And guess what, folks? This is the first point where I come to in this bullet point list, and I have to say, I believe they're correct here, and I have no workable solution or counter-argument on offer. And that's why I remarked to Digny and a few others, this list is not entirely all 100% wrong. And I know you guys might not want to hear that or read that, but there's a couple of points here that I've heard these things said by people who are sensible and reasonable and who are engaged in these topics far more expertly than myself. It's not something that we should this is not a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There is room for nuance regarding this list. Anyhow, moving along. Their bullet point 6. National service should be a universal duty. We should, as a society, seriously consider moving away from an all-volunteer force and only fight the next war if everyone shares in the risk and the cost. My response, while I enjoy discussions about universal duty, the idea of service guarantees citizenship from Heinlein and Starship Troopers, and though I agree with the idea that, folks who actually have some skin in the game, who have something at risk, they have more of a right to grumble and growl and make decisions on these things than anyone else, frankly. But I'm always hesitant about compulsory engagement in things like military service or anything that could very well get you killed. Some people simply are not suited to that sort of service. Additionally, this almost seems like a redundancy because it would be tied thematically very tightly to their bullet point 1, wouldn't it? Point 7. If a U.S. Marine asks for a better rifle, we should build it, and the same goes for software. Look, this whole point on their list, to me, just reads like a bad analogy. We're going to move along. Point 8. Public servants need not be our priests. You're damn right they shouldn't. Any business that compensated its employees in the way that the federal government compensates public servants would struggle to survive. My response, good. Public servants already wield an inordinate level of power in our lives. They should not be going into public service to enrich themselves. If your actual concern here, Palantir, is corruption and shady dealings, say so with your whole chest. Let's not beat around the bush. And think of the etymology of the phrase, of the term, public servant. You're a servant of the public, and the work that you render, the service you do, should be done in the public, in the open air. And if you're trying to be sneaky and hide some shit, people are going to raise an eyebrow or two. Get used to it. Point 9. We should show far more grace towards those who have subjected themselves to public life. The eradication of any space for forgiveness, a jettisoning of any tolerance for the complexities and contradictions of the human psyche may leave us with a cast of characters at the helm we will grow to regret. My response, no, 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 no. No grace should be granted these public servants if or when they invariably fuck up, because the sheer scale of damage that they can do for a, quote, bad moment far outstrips what John Q. Public can do in the course of their job in most cases. Obviously, I'm not including the sort of private citizens in the John Q. Public who work at places like, labs that are testing things like, I don't know, maybe a coronavirus. Winky, winky. Point 10. The psychologization of modern politics is leading us astray. those who look to the political arena to nourish their soul and sense of self, who rely too heavily on their internal life finding expression in people they may never meet, will be left disappointed. I sort of agree with that take. I have no notes on this one. Point 11. Our society has grown too eager to hasten and is often gleeful at the demise of its enemies. The vanquishing of an opponent is a moment to pause, not rejoice. My response, well, the notion of mercy or contemplation after winning a battle while the war rages on around you is admirable, but it strikes me as a little naive. I don't think Palantir believes in this one bit. The sentiment certainly has some beauty to it that I can appreciate, but the reality of the situation just doesn't match up. Their bullet point 12. The atomic age is ending. One age of deterrence, the atomic age, is ending, and a new era of deterrence built on AI is set to begin. The atomic age is ending. No, folks, it isn't. At least not the way that you think, or these folks seem to want to make you think. AI is not the deterrent in and of itself, but rather the delivery method, the control vector. The nukes, the facilities running power and water and processing food, they will share control methods tied and lashed to AI. But the AI itself, if those elements have manual or analog and unconnected controls, standalone systems, AI will be a neat trick, but quickly circumvented by going one step backward to analog control systems. I want to talk briefly as an example about an exercise that was conducted a few years back by some field operatives in the FBI. They were taking a class of recruits and trying to get them in this exercise to perform counter-surveillance practice against one another. There was Team A and Team B. Team A was comprised of some instructors in the FBI, and Team B was the new recruits. And the recruits were tasked with trying to get some information exchanged and delivered to one another in the field, and to locate and move this MacGuffin that they had placed somewhere in D.C. And they were caught out and interrupted. Their operation was disrupted by the instructors in about 20 minutes. Then they switched sides, and the instructors had to do the same thing. And, there was no time limit on this. They had to, within a week, move the MacGuffin item from point A to point B. I don't remember the specifics of what it was or where to, but the point being, after a week, the recruits said, well, the exercise is over. You guys didn't manage to move, the item in question, our flag. And the instructors said, you want to check on that? And the recruits discovered that it was not the actual item in its safe spot location. It had been replaced with a very clever near proximity, or a duplicate. And they asked, well, how did you get information to each other? How did you communicate? We didn't intercept anything. Well, the instructors had been relying on old school field work, fieldcraft, using a dead drop, using handwritten notes, and using hand signals to one another, disguises while they were moving about the city. They used old methodology because no one knew how to do it anymore. Anyway, moving along. Point 13. No other country in the history of the world has advanced progressive values more than this one. The United States is far from perfect, but it is easy to forget how much more opportunity exists in this country for those who are not hereditary elites than in any other nation on the planet. Progressive values. Yeah, hey, Those values are largely why our republic is so internally fractured and inconsistent, you dumb fucks. You know what else is progressive? Cancer. And that fucking kills its host. Point 14. American power has made... Oh, and by the way, really quick at the end of point 13 there, if hereditary elites were not such a problem, then why do we still have the Clintons and the Cheneys and the Bushes and all these other connected pockets of nepotism riding rampant roughshod through our political elites? Just a question. Next up, point 14. American power has made possible an extraordinarily long peace. Too many have forgotten or perhaps take for granted that nearly a century of some version of peace has prevailed in the world without a great power military conflict. At least 3 generations, billions of people and their children and now grandchildren have never known a world war. Well, my response, I think this is a solid 80-20 truth to blind spot ratio on this one. Yes, we've avoided global scale warfare for nearly a century, but I very much doubt that means squat to folks who are embroiled in civil strife zones. Now, does it? That peace is from the perspective of us, from where we live. We don't have great regional powers who are antagonistic to us to the point where we've had to engage in localized military armed conflict. Canada has not caused us military problems. Mexico has not caused us military scale problems. Law enforcement scale problems, yes. But national military grade conflict? No, not on our soil. And that's why it seems to us like this fits. Anyway, point 15. The post-war neutering of Germany and Japan must be undone. The defanging of Germany was an overcorrection for which Europe is now paying a heavy price. A similar and highly theatrical commitment to Japanese pacifism will, if maintained, also threaten to shift the balance of power in Asia. I'm actually in almost 95% agreement with this point on both Germany and Japan. As far as shifting the balance of power in Asia, it's been in the hands of China for some time now. We cannot act like it hasn't been. Point 16. We should applaud those who attempt to build where the market has failed to act. The culture almost snickers at Musk's interest in grand narrative, as if billionaires ought to simply stay in their lane of enriching themselves. Any curiosity or genuine interest in the value of what he has created is essentially dismissed, or perhaps lurks from beneath a thinly veiled scorn. This one's a little sneaky. I feel like it's a little bit of a put-on by Palantir. I need more time to sit with this one. 17. Silicon Valley must play a role in addressing violent crime. Many politicians across the United States have essentially shrugged when it comes to violent crime, abandoning any serious efforts to address the problem or take on any risk with their constituencies or donors in coming up with solutions and experiments in what should be a desperate bid to save lives. On the notion of Silicon Valley playing a role in addressing violent crimes, for me, I suspect that Digny, his mentor Ryan, and I share a sense of unsettlement by this phrasing. It's just vague enough to offer Palantir some plausible deniability, but my mind immediately turned to one science fiction reference, Minority Report. Using AI algorithms and predictive modeling to instantiate a pre-crime program. If you listen carefully, you can actually hear my skin crawling. Point 18. The ruthless exposure of the private lives of public figures drives far too much talent away from government service. The public arena and the shallow and petty assaults against those who dare to do something other than enrich themselves has become so unforgiving that the Republic is left with a significant roster of ineffectual, empty vessels whose ambition one would forgive if there were any genuine belief structure lurking within it. My response, good. Also, this is sort of a retread or supplemental to item 8, it seems. I really don't care much for this sense that I get from this list that Palantir is cosseting up to politicians by way of wanting to give them cover for their shitty behavior. Additionally, these public figures are still constantly enriching themselves, usually by means of underhanded tactics. Have we already forgotten about Nancy Pelosi's market foresight? The fact that she has bamboozled the public through some sort of stock market manipulation. It's almost a verified fact. Point 19. The caution in public life that we unwittingly encourage is corrosive. Those who say nothing wrong often say nothing much at all. I completely agree with that sentiment. I have no notes to give on that one. Point 20. The pervasive intolerance of religious belief in certain circles must be resisted. The elite's intolerance of religious belief is perhaps one of the most telling signs that its political project constitutes a less open intellectual movement than many within it would claim. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But this sentiment, as put forth and presented here, lacks the courage to say what a lot of people here in the West can observe if they were being brutally honest. They can observe it by asking the following questions. Which religious beliefs, sir, and in which circles? I ask those questions because I already have an answer. Christian beliefs in the circles of arts, academia, and politics in the West. You see, if an artist in the West espouses or simply confesses Christian influences and motivations to their work, they are dragged, mocked, belittled, boycotted, silenced, deplatformed, labeled anachronistic. But if they espouse Jewish faith, well, you can't mock that or you're anti-Semitic. They're Muslim in faith? Well, don't criticize that or you're automatically considered a racist and an Islamophobe and cancelled. Are you a teacher? Are you in academia? Well, no Bible messages or imagery in schools, but sure, go ahead and fly that pride flag. Wear that hijab. Go ahead and recite the Quran instead of the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, get fucked. We know the answers. You people are just too cowardly to say it with your full fucking chest. 21, and it goes hand in hand with point 21. Some cultures have produced vital advances. Others remain dysfunctional and regressive. North Sentinel Island, anyone? All cultures are now equal. Criticism and value judgments are forbidden. Yet this new dogma glosses over the fact that certain cultures, and indeed certain subcultures, have produced wonders, while others have proven middling, and worse, regressive and harmful. Well, let's consider, ladies and gentlemen, which cultures, what subcultures actually encourage people to think and to innovate and to create and to make things of wonderment and joy rather than just subjugating anyone and everything under their boot. It's pretty easy to figure out that some cultures actually have the intellectual wherewithal and the IQ required to create products that are useful to our lives on a daily basis and that can actually give us something of functional value. Point 22. We must resist the shallow temptation of a vacant and hollow pluralism. We in America, and more broadly the West, have for the past half-century resisted defining national cultures in the name of inclusivity. But inclusion into what? And that's an excellent question. Because, you know, for a lot of folks, they talk about how diversity is our strength. But what they fail to consider is that when you are so diverse and so inclusive that there's only one group of people who are allowed to be the enemy and are kept out and perpetually villainized and told that they are to blame for all of history's and the world's evils, does that seem like that's going to hold up under scrutiny when you consider the phrase inclusivity or diversity is our strength? Doesn't hold up because it's not logically consistent. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I ask that you take care of yourselves, and as always, keep reading.